Let's circle back. We're going to circle back to this political story. We have this from the Daily Mail. You guys want to talk about civil war? Let's talk about civil war.
Uh-oh.
Louisiana advances bill classifying abortion as homicide. Republican representative behind the bill says the state cannot wait on the Supreme Court. The move on Wednesday came 2 days after the leaked draft about Roe v. Wade. Louisiana State Rep Danny McCormick, a Republican, introduced the Abolition of Abortion Act in March. The legislation, approved in a 7-2 committee vote, now moves to the state's full House. The Louisiana bill is one of a raft of proposals by lawmakers in conservative states. Such restrictions could go further than the so-called trigger laws, bans, and other regulations that will take effect in some 26 states should Roe be overturned. So let's talk about what this means. If abortion is homicide, that means a lot in terms of what happens to abortion providers.
Can I ask you something? Is there a difference between the legal classification of homicide and the legal classification of murder? If you're to write a law that says X is homicide, does that mean homicide, it's open to being considered murder, but not necessarily considered murder in every case?
Or is it a different degree?
Homicide means a human killed a human.
Yeah, exactly. But so homicide could be involuntary manslaughter. It could be first degree murder, second degree murder. I'm curious if this is specified in any way in the legislation.
Did they mention the degree?
They're just calling it. They're saying it's homicide, which means they're granting life rights to the fetus.
Yeah.
Which means what? Are they part of the census? I asked this before the show. It's a silly question, but like, are they going to classify these now humans as part of the census when they're taking a census? Come on. I mean, they're not human. They're not people yet.
Well, they're not giraffes, man.
They're not people, though. They're developing fetus humans. They're not people until they get a birth certificate legally.
No, that's the logic they used to keep slaves in.
Well, that's the law. That's the law right now. If you want to change the law and say that they're people and give them a birth certificate on conception.
No. The law isn't that you gain personhood with a birth certificate. There's no law that says
there's that. There's no person until there's a personality.
No, that's not true.
Or until it's legally called a person.
No personality.
What is a person? Let's look up what a person is.
Yeah, look. Actually, that's a good idea.
Let's
define.
Let's get semantic.
I mean, it's a philosophical distinction, right? But I would actually make the argument that the distinction between, so I guess you can make an argument there that there are persons who aren't human, right? But every human is a person. You can't not grant rights to a living human being.
Well, a person is the body of a human being.
That's been the worst civil rights violations in our country's history, is when we've tried to define personhood and who is or who is not worthy enough to be a person.
So this is where I think the abortion issue is very much our second Civil War catalyst. They had actually argued in pre-Civil War that slaves didn't have personhood, that they didn't have the same rights. The Constitution didn't apply to them. They had no personhood. You cannot allow someone to arbitrarily decide when a human being is a person.
Or women weren't even granted the same rights just a couple decades before Roe was passed.
Yeah.
Well, the argument I would make, and part of why I'm saying that there are persons who aren't human, is like, so for example, it is a little tricky. It's a little tricky definition-wise, and I appreciate you asking the question, because my first thought was, well, maybe it's a false distinction, but also I know that, like, as Catholics, we will use the phrase person to sometimes apply to the members of the Trinity. But that said, when you're talking about human beings specifically, and people try to create this distinction between a human and a person, to me, that sort of smacks of the arbitrary distinction between gender and sex. I think it's just a false distinction created so that you can do depraved things.
You have right now, Ian, what you're saying is, these human beings are not people because we haven't written the paperwork for them.
Basically, yeah, legally.
But that's not.
There's
that's not
7
true.
definitions of the word person, which is annoying. But I'll pick the 6th one because I think that's the one. This is from Merriam-Webster. One such as a human being, a partnership, or a corporation that is recognized by law as the subject of rights and duties. So if they change the law, they become people. I guess is by that definition.
The point is, you asking for paperwork I reject outright. That means you would assert the right of the state to say, we've decided that Ashley's not a person for these arbitrary reasons.
So do they count towards the census?
That's a question for the census.
For this governor
guy.
Not
for personhood.
Ian, can I ask you something? Because the birth certificate also mentions the sex of the child. Are they ambiguous with respect to their sex prior to getting a birth certificate because of that?
If you don't know what the sex is, yeah.
But there was tort law for years and decades in this country that recognized the unborn as persons as regards to, inheritance and different things like that. I mean, we had those laws when the 14th Amendment was ratified, tort laws identifying the unborn as persons.
And it can also be,
tell me about that.
I mean, there are people who have also been punished and, for killing a woman who was pregnant and killing the
enhanced
baby as well.
penalties if you kill a baby in the womb.
But you were about to explain. I'm sorry, I cut you off. I think Ian asked you a question.
Yeah,
tort
he said,
law of
what were those
personhood.
tort laws?
Yeah, so tort laws, I mean, there are laws that, from what I understand, and I'm not, a legal scholar, but they were laws that were like kind of not laws, but they were recognized for the most part as like common law in the United States. But tort laws mostly refer to property. But there were tort laws in terms of inheritance for the unborn in the United States. And what's interesting is the Roe v. Wade decision, they hinged it so strongly on the 14th Amendment and this, right to privacy. But when the 14th Amendment was ratified, we had these tort laws recognizing the unborn as persons and, having rights to certain things. So it was just the mental gymnastics that was done in the Roe decision in general, just as an abuse of discretion and constitutionality is insane.
And also, when someone uses a phrase like, we found this in the penumbra of the shadow,
penumbra
then
rights.
You can say there could be a chance that this is mental gymnastics.
And we saw this was like, they said like, it was unenumerated rights followed by unenumerated problems, right? And they just, first of all, there's not a right to privacy at all. There's no right to privacy in the Constitution. You have some right to privacy as it refers to the Fourth Amendment and, unwarranted searches and seizures, but you don't have a right to privacy at all.
Oh, this is interesting. What is this?
Interesting. I'd have to think about that.
I have to.
So concerning the tort law you mentioned, is it so like if a woman is pregnant and the father dies, his and say the mother and the father dies, and
you'd have to look it up because I don't want to, say the wrong thing, but there was tort laws that recognize them as persons.
I'm on PubMed. It says prenatal tort law and the personhood of the unborn child, a separate legal existence, but I can't find. I'm looking for documents.
So I have a docket from the Supreme Court. I just pulled it up. I got to look into it a little bit more.
There's a fantastic book too called Abuse
the corpus
of Discretion.
Of the Supreme Court opinions
Great
from
book.
1850 to 1880 suggest that an unborn child is a person within the meaning of the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution.
Fascinating.
That is
So
fascinating.
I have to look up what this is.
I want to read
So
more about
and
that.
so many people
Curious.
think that the argument is just, I think abortion's immoral, but no, there was serious abuse of discretion as it comes to the way they decided this. There was populationist theory in the clerk's memos. There was incredible influence from populationists when they decided Roe. It is incredible when you look into it. You look from the clerk memos and everything like that. There were so many more things that influenced. Even Ruth Bader Ginsburg said it wasn't about women at all. It wasn't about women.
No, abortion is not about women. It's
about
about the
increasing
abortion
the population.
it's about the abortion industry profiting off of slaughtering unborn children, and it's about allowing men consequence-free access to women's bodies, like consequence-free sexual access
it really
to women's
is
bodies.
too about keeping people that are poor from having 50 kids.
Yep.
It's sad, but that's a big part of it.
It's very sad. I agree, because like human life is only valuable if that person is born into a middle class or upper class family.
Yeah,
it's
that's
very
the only
sad. I
thing
mean,
that
that seems to be
matters.
the dominant modern
The
view.
challenge here with not recognizing personhood for the unborn is like a baby at 8.5 months who's not yet been born inside the womb next to a baby that is 8.5 months from the point of conception that was emergency delivered via C-section. That baby that's out of the womb can't be touched. But the baby that's still in the womb of the exact same development could be executed.
Yeah, that is the way to
Yes.
go. I agree with you. That is so weird.
You had Northam talking about not resuscitating babies after they're born.
No, resuscitating them and then having a conversation about what to do next is what he said.
This is the question I have. Look,
bad.
Evil.
I can understand an argument from the point of first trimester, nothing second or nothing third in terms of abortion. But when you're talking about a viable baby that outside the womb of its own independent life could not be harmed under penalty of law, and a baby exactly the same, but in the womb can be, something doesn't make sense.
It seems like all these laws were written way back in the day before modern technology, where you could do an ultrasound or like see the baby struggling during an abortion process, trying to avoid the forceps or whatever. Like before you knew the gender before it was born, because the 14th Amendment specifically says after they're born.
And their standard was much different. So their standard was quickening back then for abortion. When they did have abortions, even back in the day, the standard was quickening, which was when you felt the baby. And then when they found out that, oh, this dude's actually alive a little sooner than that, they amended it to, hey, we should not be doing these as soon as we know that they're there. They thought that was conception. They didn't know that quickening was not, okay, I'm pregnant. This is when the baby, it's just.
What is quickening?
Quickening is when you can feel the baby moving.
Yeah, when a baby
And so they had no idea that was not conception.
Yeah, exactly. And so the development of embryological science has made it so much more clear that it is a living person. I mean, I've mentioned this before on the show, 95% of biologists surveyed say life begins at fertilization. And so the science is very much settled on this issue.
I would say it makes it very clear that it's a living organism. Whether or not it's a person is a legal discussion.
Well, what do you call a living human? Is a living human not a person?
It depends on what stage they're in. If it's the 2 days after conception, it's you could argue it's about to be a human living, and then it develops into a human. But it's not really I mean, the whole idea of a person is that it's got a personality, that it can communicate, that it's a person. You know,
I don't want to be on the wrong side of that argument, right? Because like I said, the worst civil rights violations in our country's history and the world have been when we've tried to decide who is or who is not a person, and I just don't want to touch that. I don't want to be on the wrong side of history, and that's just where.
Well,
I'm
we're
at
kind
with
of creating history right now.
Yeah,
and I don't want to be on the wrong side of it.
There's no right or wrong here. We just got to do the best we can.
Who cares?
Well, Ian, so here's why I would push back on that. So I think there are arguments that I could make against your definition of personhood and in favor of the idea that the unborn child is a person at all stages. But I believe that the burden of proof is actually strongly on the one who says it isn't a person. I think you actually have to prove that because, for example, if I'm going to detonate a building, I need to know that there is no person inside of it. I can't say, well, there might be, we don't know. It's a complex philosophical discussion about whether there's a person in there. We're just going to detonate it. And if, someone dies, someone dies. I think we all recognize you need to be 100% perfectly clear that the activity you're partaking in is not the killing of a person before it's permissible at all. And that hasn't been proven. And it hasn't been proven because it is a person. But I don't even hear left-wingers, I don't even hear people in favor of abortion try to advance an argument that it's not a person. They just say it isn't, or they say you haven't proven it is a person.
No, they just
it's like
say
the burden of proof is on them.
They say it's a lump of cells.
I mean, I don't want it to make an emotional argument. You had a baby. You had one inside of you. So you understand, I guess I would think that it starts to develop a personality before it leaves the female body at some point, whether or not you can interact with it or not.
What does personality have to do with someone, whether or not someone's
a personality is derived from the person. It's just these vague terms.
No, if there is a mute deaf child, we don't say they have no rights.
Well, so I would say it has a personality, like it might react different to different stimuli in the womb. So that's a type of personality, you could argue.
Be a person, yep.
This one doesn't like
get
loud
rid of
noise.
all
This
people
one
with
likes
no
rock and
personality.
roll.
So what about when someone's unconscious? I mean, when a person is
coma.
unconscious, they're not displaying any traits of personality.
No, but they've already been established. It's a person that's unconscious.
Oh,
But-
let's say someone finds like
What
a
if he's a
naked
vegetable?
person in a hospital, like a naked person in the forest who's completely unconscious and unresponsive, but has a heartbeat. Do you just be like, that's not a person, I can do whatever I want to it?
Do they have personhood if they have no mind?
What if
If you find an unconscious woman and you do anything to that woman, you're going to prison for a long time.
So if you find a body,
broke,
someone like you
Tony.
said, I don't know if vegetable is probably an insensitive way to talk about it, but if someone has basically zero brain activity and there's just a heartbeat and a body, then is it a person?
So yes, but also
Legally,
you
I
will
think
go
so.
to prison for doing something to that body, like physically harming it.
And then even then, there isn't really a perfect comparison there, right? Because in the case of an unborn child, we know that we are 99% sure that they will end up developing all of the cognitive faculties that you're mentioning a person in a coma lacking.
Yeah, this is why I brought up
and
birth
so-
control at the beginning, if that's also like plan B.
But
But
it
I don't want to
stops
derail.
anything from
Can I
that
also
because
mention
they're-
something? I just want to say the definition of personhood given by Google is the least helpful thing. The least helpful definition. The quality or condition of being an individual person. Thank you so much.
Dude, look up the
What
definition
about
of personhood.
conjoined
Insane.
twins? What about conjoined twins?
And then-
Are they not people?
The other definition they give personhood or personality is the status of being a person. Oh, thank you so much. It's like
Yeah,
you can't. This is
person.
the first thing they teach you in an
Sometimes
etymology class. You
a
can't use the
character
word
or
in the
part
definition.
In or as if in a play. That's the definition of person. Come on.
If you
Miriam.
look at this Supreme Court docket, it says, according to Webster's dictionary, a child is a, quote, person not yet of the age of majority. So we are using the word person in the definition, but the understanding is that someone who is small is just a person who hasn't reached, for example, the age of consent. This is why we understand that children cannot consent to sex, although this has gone somewhat by the wayside in the age of trans children. But this is something that they were mulling even back when they were looking at abortion in the first place.
I just think it's kind of simple. Can you kill a human unprovoked for no reason?
No.
Only if they can't
only
make
if you're in the
any
military.
noise. Only if they can't make noise.
Well, that's not. I said no reason. In the military,
if you see a kid walk, well, yeah, you gotta. You're
there's
supposed to have a
tons of
reason.
reasons.
You're supposed
Yeah.
to have a reason.
You definitely can't just go kill a kid.
You can. They have the power to, and they have done it
you
in the
will get-
past
Yes,
for sure.
Ian, and you
look
can
at the My Lai
physically-
massacre in Vietnam.
You can physically do a lot of things. The point is, under the law, as you so.
Yeah, but they'll get protected. Look at the My Lai massacre. All those guys got protected except for the captain that initiated that massacre.
The point is, Is there a
But did the
is there a
children have
reason?
personalities?
Is there a reason? Yes, war was the reason. Can you walk up to
Fear
a
was the
random
reason.
person and
Did
just
they-
end their life? The answer is no. Is a fetus a human being? The answer is yes. Therein lies the major conundrum. The left has to define a way when life begins. Otherwise, abortion. If you were to operate under the pretext of the 14th Amendment as per Roe v. Wade, the actual ruling should be that you can't perform an abortion because it would violate the equal rights under the law of the fetus, which is a human being. Now, they'll try and use the argument that it says person's born, but then you run into the conundrum, which I mentioned earlier. A baby who is born at 8 months and a baby who is still in the womb at 8 months are identical in every way. One doesn't have rights because of the layer of flesh around it.
Yeah, that's modern
That makes no
technology
sense.
is forcing us to change the law.
No. That's not modern technology. There were many circumstances in which a baby was born at 8 months and survived. 8 months is viable without, you might need some medical intervention. But let's say let's say 9 months, and one baby went a little bit longer than 9 months. The law right now is a baby at 9 months, fully delivered and healthy and crying, and a baby that hasn't been delivered. One can legally be killed because they haven't been given
And
personhood
they're
yet,
the
not
same
leaving a
thing.
vagina.
They're the same thing. I know when I got a 4D ultrasound, it was this. He looked just the same when he came out, and he'd go in the same little position. I'm like, you're the same little kid that I saw.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I just saw a picture. Somebody on Twitter showed who was it? They
They
showed the
kinda look like
ultrasound
aliens,
and the
but-
baby, and it was
Yeah,
like that's
with
the
his
same
arms
person.
up. Yeah, he's
Well-
sleeping like that.
And I want to
Yep,
mention,
same thing.
I
Same
mean,
person.
yes, it is the case that in 1973, our prenatal science was not as developed as it is today. We didn't know enough, but that's no excuse. It's horrifically irresponsible to say, well, we don't know a whole lot about the circumstances in the womb, so we're just going to err on the side of go ahead and kill it.
Yeah.
Well, and even then, they said it should be rare, right? And that was the big thing. Even Joe Biden was saying it should be rare. And we've gone so far that not only is it legal and acceptable, but they're shouting their abortions. It's
And-
constant. They make it like it's removing a wart, and it's a simple, easy procedure that has no consequences.
I just want to mention one thing. I know I'm sort of talking about the science here. I think it's straightforward. I think it's common sense that it is a person the entire time. It is a human being because that's the only reason anyone wants to kill it. You wouldn't be killing it if it wasn't a human person who you would be responsible for.
I just don't want to conflate the word person with human at this point because of their legal definitions.
They're
Sorry,
the
what were you
same
saying,
thing.
Tim?
Yeah.
What would happen if you took a newborn puppy and just put it outside and walked away?
Not much.
He might eat
Cassandra
some
would come
wineberries.
kill you.
Yeah, probably.
Cassandra
Serious
Fairbanks.
question. Would you
No,
do
I
it?
mean, yeah, I'm not sure what the animal protection laws are, but I assume you would get in trouble for something like that. Aren't there laws on the books
think
that
you
prevent
can
you
ha-
from abusing animals or
No,
neglecting
but
them?
I think you can have puppies outside.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you leave a dog outside, right, that's an animal. But I think Tim is saying if a dog died through negligence, is that
No,
the
if
point
you
you're
take a newborn puppy and put it in your backyard, just walk away.
making? Like a newborn puppy that needs to be
Yeah.
with its
I
mother?
didn't
or-
say anything. I
Okay,
just said what would
yeah.
happen if you did it.
I don't know.
Nobody would care. Like if you took a baby and walked outside, put it in the grass and walked
Oh,
away,
I
you'd be
hear
like,
you, I
what's
hear you,
going
I
on? Are
hear
you
you.
nuts?
Even helplessness, they are helpless for so long. My kid has
Yeah,
no
we have
idea what
big
he's doing.
brains,
Like he
yeah.
rolls over on his stomach and he starts crying. He's like, I don't know.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. But if you want to check out the full show live, tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And if you want more special access content, head over to timcast.com and become a member. Your membership helps sustain this company, keep our journalists employed, makes this show happen, and you will get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, and there's a massive library to check out. So again, go to timcast.com or tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., and we'll see you all there.